All right, Steve.
Yeah, let me share my screen. So are you getting that image?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Well, to start out with, the moon has been my go-to favorite subject for as long as I can remember. I love the fact that you can see all these geological features from 250,000 miles away. I've always had this fascination with the moon. I've mostly been an observer for most of the time, but about 8 years ago, I started to delve into imaging the moon. The images I'll show tonight sort of show the progression from my first images into fairly high resolution photos. I've been lucky enough to have 4 of my photos published in Sky and Telescope. The first photo is of the moon after a big brush fire in California. I knew the full moon would be rising, so using an 80 to 200 Nikon zoom, I captured this image. This was my first one in Sky and Telescope. Came out really nice. My second one is sort of a close-up picture of a lunar eclipse. This was taken in 2018, I believe. It was using a 6-inch refractor, and the eclipse moon, a close-up, really hard to focus because there's no real sharp image. What I do, I turned my 6-inch refractor on a bright star, focused on that, and turned it back on this, and I was able to capture just a lot of detail on the eclipse moon. My next picture was of the, let's see. Oh, wait a second, let me get it back. See, I'll try to get back this, get it back further. It was of the solar eclipse in 2017. I'll try to find it later. Okay, just a second here. Okay, next picture, I'll get back to that later if I can. Next picture was the first really close-up, high-resolution shot I was able to get. And let me zoom this in. This is of the craters Ptolemaeus and Alphonsus. And if you look at it, I was able to capture, like, from my count, about 4 dozen craters inside the crater Ptolemaeus. I shot this with my 9¼ Schmidt Cassegrain, and I used the ZWO 290 monochrome for it. I sort of developed a long process to get these shots. It's sort of involved, but it's worked out pretty well. The first process is just to make sure the scope is collimated. I bought this used a couple years before I took this picture, and it took me a couple years to collimate, off and on, working off and on, collimate it and clean it up, but the results have just been really fantastic. This scope was about 10 years old, and it was made in the USA. It's just, the optics are just super sharp. I just love the fact that I'm able to, you know, capture all the details inside the craters, all the geological features. Secondly, in the process, the scene has to be pretty decent. I've imaged so many times where the scene was just so bad, I couldn't capture anything. Sort of close to that is, I always shoot my lunar photos when the moon is fairly high altitude, above 65 to 75 degrees, just to escape the worst parts of the atmosphere. Next comes the focus. And again, this is sort of a long process, but I found that it's worked out pretty well. I've imaged the moon and planets before, and when you have the camera connected to a computer, one thing you know is that the image on the computer is always percolating. And I found that you sort of have to develop a sense of when it's moving the less, and then you do your AVI capture. And I've had some pretty good luck on it. On the processing side, first of all, I use SharpCap to capture the video. I've tried other software, but this works out pretty well for me. Once I capture the images, I go on the computer and use AutoStacker to stack the images. I started using Registax a long time ago, but I thought AutoStacker is much more intuitive, and I've just had so much success with it. Once I run it through AutoStax, let me see. Here's a screenshot of AutoStax. And it's a long process. It takes long to analyze it. First of all, you have to use the surface in an image stabilization. That's for the moon. You have planets if you're using planets. And then you go to the quality estimator. You analyze the image and it comes up with a quality graph. And then once I do, I go to the left-hand side, which shows the best quality pictures, usually anywhere from 25 to 50% to stack. Over on the right side, you can see the green is where you put in the percentage to stack. After that, let's see. And this is when you set the alignment points. You can do a lot. You can do bigger ones with less alignment points. I found that using around the 200 on the left side usually works out the best. And it places, then you place the AP grid and you stack the images. It takes a few minutes, maybe 5 to 10 minutes to do the stacking, but the results have been pretty good. My next image, going back to the images, this is another image of the straight wall, Rupus recta. And again, I just love the fact that I'm able to capture all the geological details, like the crater up at top. You can see fracture lines inside the crater. You can see the central mountain. That's, I believe, the crater Arzakel. And then the crater on the right to the straight wall is Thebat. But, and of course, off to the lower left, you can see Rico ridges. This just shows the power of AutoStacker in capturing all those small details. The next photo is Mare Crisium, and you can see all the Rico ridges in it. This one also ran in Sky Intellis. I just love the detail in the mountains along the rim of the crater, and just a plethora of details inside the crater. The next one is a Mare Humorum. This one also ran in Sky Telescope. If you look at the crater up at top of the Mare Humorum, you can see all the fracture lines inside the crater. That's what I really like to capture, is all the small details. And inside the Mare Humorum, you can see the Rico ridges, the rippled areas where lava is flooded in, solidified, and sort of crumpled up. And my last photo, this is of Palus Epidemiarum. It's the March of Epidemics. And just again, the amount of detail you can see off to the upper right, you can see the concentric crater Hesidosius A. And it looks like a little donut shape. And there's another one inside the Palus Epidemiarum, which is Marth. And then up to the center top is the ghost crater keys. This is where the lava has flowed in to the crater, almost covered it up to the rim. And then off to the left, you can see fracture lines from, I believe that's Mare Humora. But it's just amazing that I'm able to capture all these small details on the crater. And this is from a 9¼ Celestron. And again, using a ZW290 monochrome camera. And that's pretty much it. If anybody has any questions.
Yeah, Steve, I have a question. In addition to stacking them in auto stacker, do you do any additional sharpening?
Yeah, so after I stack everything in auto stacker, I'll go to Registax to use the wavelet function, and that just really brings out the detail. I used to do stacking in Registax, but it was just sort of hard to use. When auto stacker came in, just much easier to go through the process. And after Registax, that does the main sharpening and the wavelet functions. Then I'll often go to Photoshop to crop the image, maybe do a little more sharpening, change the contrast. I can bring up the shadow details in Photoshop. And then sometimes after Photoshop, I will go to Topaz Denoise, which is a newer software which takes away all the electronic noise. I won't do that often, just if I have a lot of noise, but then basically it's auto stacker, then Registax using the wavelet function, and then Photoshop to do some additional processing.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks. So you think auto stacker is fairly straightforward to use? Are there good tutorials to look at?
Oh, there are awful lot of tutorials on YouTube. I'm still discovering things about auto stacker. About using drizzling, how many percentage of frames to stack. I've gotten a lot on it, but it's sort of discovering new details all the time. But I found that that's pretty much the best stacking software to use.
Have you ever tried taking photos with an iPhone or a smartphone and working with them, or do you just?
Not really. Straightforward. Just my 9¼ CS, Schmidt Cassegrain with a ZW camera on it. I sort of avoid iPhone, connected to an eyepiece, just because you go through a lot of optics that take away from the sharpness. I've sort of developed this effort to get as sharp as I can. I used to be a newspaper photographer, so you always go for the sharpness, the details. And then again, one other thing, I always try to bring along a realistic images. With Registax, it's very easy to over sharpen and it becomes really fried the image. So I tried to get a normal contrast between the highlights and the shadow areas.
What kind of frame rate are you going for when you do these?
I'm sorry?
What kind of frame rate or images per second are you trying to get your clarity?
Well, it's hard to understand, but I try to shoot about anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 frames. And I've been looking forward to doing more, up 10,000, 20,000 frames. I've seen a lot of imagers use that higher frame count. Just because you use more, you're always going to throw out a lot of images there, a lot of frames that are because of bad scene. So we try to get a lot of images or a lot of frames to image with process.
Just so you can understand. I'm just trying to get, do you get like 80 frames per second or 100 frames per
Oh,
second?
it's a, I found that it depends a lot on the scene, because the scene goes bad, the frame rate goes down. So I've imaged anywhere from 50 frames a second, to 3 frames a second. Because when you get a lot of scene, especially at this high magnification, the frame rate goes down really far.
Cutting down the sensor size that's in play.
I'm sorry, you're a little garbled there.
Okay. And I know in SharpCap, you can reduce the effective sensor size, which it
Oh.
cuts.
Yes. Well, the smaller the size, the higher the magnification, and the lower the frame rate. I usually go to the higher size on SharpCap.
Steve, were these images done at the native focal length, or did you use a Barlow?
I think on, I was trying to remember that. I think on the Ptolemaeus and Alphonsus image, I used a Barlow, but most have been just the native prime focal length.
Excellent.
What is that crater up in the upper right corner? It looks like a little bullseye, like a circle within a crater.
On the last image,
Yeah, the one that's up on the screen right now.
oh, that's the concentric. There are
Yeah,
a few concentric craters. That's the larger one, the Hisidoscius. And actually, I like to go into the geology of all these, and it's an open question how those are formed, because it just looks like a really donut shape. And I thought that maybe there was a little dome in the crater that collapsed and created this donut shape, but it's still an open question. Yeah, I love the fact that you can see all these little features. I mean, here the moon is 250,000 miles away, and I can get an image that shows all the different geological features. Of course, I've always loved to observe the moon, and now doing fairly high resolution images. I've probably got 10 books on the moon.
have you been able to measure the smallest feature in an image that you're able to resolve, like 1/8 of a mile or 500 yards or something like that?
I think I'm around 1 to 2 miles. I've
Okay.
got what's the software, Virtual Moon Atlas, and it actually has a measuring tool that you can use.
Okay, thanks.
If you go back to your Ptolemaeus picture, you'll see that over on the left edge is a little string of craters, real tiny ones.
Yeah.
That's Catena Davy, and the smallest ones in that Catena, which you show clearly, are 1 kilometer craters.
There you go. Yeah. There's also another. Is that the one to the lower right, lower left? Because there's another crater chain off to the upper right.
Can you go back to that picture?
Let's see if I can. Let's see. Hold on just a second. Okay. Let me bring it. Oh, here it is. Okay, this one.
Yes, that one. If you look over on the left side, you'll see the one crater. It's got this little string of tiny, tiny craters going onto the floor of that crater. That's Catena Davy. And
Yeah.
the smallest ones near the crater wall are 1 kilometer in diameter.
Well, you can compare that to all the craterlets inside Ptolemaeus, and it's just amazing how the detail I can pick up. And if you look up to upper right, there's another crater chain. I forget the name of it. And then you can go to the crater below Ptolemais, which is Alphonsus. And see those, there are several dark areas around the inside rim. Those are either volcanic cones or where a crater has hit the floor and threw out a lot of dark material. I think it's probably more like pyroclastic flows from secondary volcanism in those spots.
I think they are vents, volcanic vents, but over on the right side of Alphonsus, you can see that Rima running down
Yes.
on the inside, and that is about 1 kilometer across as well.
Mhm. And this with a 9 1/4 Schmidt cascade too. Yeah, this was in I think September 2020 issue of Sky and Tells, and the reproduction a bit disappointing, but still I have this image. I think I've counted like 4 dozen craterlets inside Ptolemais.
Well, I think, Steve, that, you've given us a good display of what high resolution imaging can do, because, every time when I'm out and the moon's out and I point the scope at it, I usually get terrible, terrible seeing. And I think, you've been pretty lucky here to get this many good high resolution images.
I have a number of images that are nothing, just because the scene was bad, and I took a AVI set when I went to process, thinking there's nothing here. So you have to be lucky with scene, and again, always image the moon when it's at high altitude.
Do you have any rules of thumb that you follow for deciding when you might have good seeing in terms of lunar imaging? I know a lot of times it's pretty much of a crapshoot. You go out and you set everything up, and you may be surprised, but most of the time you're not.
Exactly. That's a good way of describing it. It's funny. I mean, I've done imaging of planets, I've done imaging of the moon, and you really have to develop a second sense of, like I said, the images on these high magnification on the computer, it's always going to be percolating. You just have to get a second sense of when it's not percolating as much. And that's where you begin to see small details every once in a while. So when you shoot this image set using AutoStacker, you'll throw away the bad frames and just process the good ones. So it's experience.
Okay. Any other questions for Steve while we've got him here? All right, I think you've amazed all of us, so there's no questions left.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Okay, I appreciate your volunteering, Steve. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. So we have about a half an hour or so of Zoom recording time, a little more if we need it. Any other images to share or questions or comments that folks want to bring up? Steve, you can unshare yours if you'd like.
Okay, let me figure this out. Oh, stop share. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, this is my first share, so it worked out pretty well.
Okay, thank you. All right, the floor is open. If you have comments or questions, this is the time to bring them up.
So Greg, I've got a couple of images that I can show,
Okay,
I think. Folks we've been chatting in the forum about Russ Croman's BlurXterminator, which is causing quite a stir these days, especially on Astrobin. There's a huge back and forth on Astrobin about that software, and as it was with Topaz as well. So this is the latest one to come out, and we've been having some discussions about that. And I told folks there that I would bring a couple images to show what BlurXterminator is doing. And so if I can share my screen, let's see here. Okay, I can get rid of this. Let me bring up. All right, can you see my PixInsight screen?
We're seeing oh yeah, now we do.
Okay, so I wanted to show a couple images. So I've got an IC342 image that I wanted to show, but because BlurXterminator works on linear images, so this is not a processed image. This is the linear output, and it's basically a deconvolution product. And so I wanted to flash and show people the difference. So this is out of drizzle, and there's been a DBE done, and of course a background subtraction, but that's it. And so I want to flash the two pictures to show you a before and after with this software. So this is the before picture, and this is the after picture. So this is sort of replacing PixInsight's deconvolution. And on my software, on my system for Raza 11, I always struggle with the star sizes. So the first thing that jumped out at me was the stars, right? So this is a pretty good indication that, and I haven't done any, this is right after the BlurXterminator. So I can come in, so the first thing is the stars, and now I'm going to show, I'll just go to the next level. I've zoomed in, okay, and I'm going to show the difference between, so this is the pre, can you, hopefully folks are seeing this.
Yeah.
And this is the post. So clearly the details are just far better, both in the PSFs of the stars and in the details of the galaxies. So this coming out of linear, going into nonlinear processing makes a huge difference. And so I will show the equivalent final pictures. And if you're good with deconvolution, and I've had plenty of practice with deconvolution, you can approach what this software is doing. But I think even in this case, the software is better than I can do myself. And unfortunately, because these are nonlinear and hard to match a nonlinear processing, especially if you start with a linear and go through a nonlinear processing flow to try and get any picture to be exactly the same as some other picture that you did earlier, virtually impossible. At least I can't do it. So, but anyways, I'll give you a good look at this one. This is the after image, and this is the before image. And I'm going to zoom in. Clearly, and before I zoom, you can see that the stars, they're tighter, but to really see, you're going to have to zoom in a little more. So I'm going to bring into this level, and then I will match the two pictures, and now we'll flash them again. So this is the after picture, and if you look at the stars, look at the smallest of the stars, you'll see that they're much more pinpoint than the stars are in the before. So even though there's different highlights that are being shown in those pictures, overall in the galaxy, I think it's possible to see what the software does. So that's IC342. I'm going to move to M51 unless somebody has a picture of, unless somebody has some questions about this particular picture. Okay. So then the next one I'm going to show, I'm going to play the same game, same deal. This is linear data. Yeah. So haven't done any stretching, haven't done any operations on this. It's just right out of decon, background subtraction and a DBE, and that's it. So then you run through the software, and this is the before picture. Okay, this is what I did originally with M51. I haven't taken any more M51 data. This is my old M51 data, and all I did was process it with BlurXterminator, and this is what I got. So quite a difference in the structure, both in the PSF sizes for the stars and in the structure of the galaxy. Because of the network, I'm not sure if folks are seeing this right or not. Are people able to see the difference?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So I think it's far better to start with this data, of course, going into nonlinear processing than it is to start with the other. And so now I'll show the final picture. And I worked on this today. And okay, so the first image, this is the old image. And now I'll flash to the new image. And again, don't pay so much attention to like the haziness of the outer cloud of stars and what have you. That's not what I'm trying to show here. Mostly what I'm trying to show is the detail of the star, the star PSFs and the detail in the galaxies. So let me zoom in, and I think it's going to become obvious pretty quickly. Let me change and sync again. Okay, and so now that's the before picture. And you can see kind of the dust lanes and what have you in the arms of the galaxies, what kind of resolution you have there. Look at the stars. Okay, kind of crummy. And then this is after. And again, maybe my processing skills aren't the best, but I think that it's clear that this software is onto something. Certainly the PSFs are getting cleaned up in the stars quite a bit. And I am just beginning to learn this software. I think there aren't too many controls on it, but I think the subtleties here are about how much signal you have and what you can pull out of the background. And there's quite a bit of work to understand, I think, what this thing is doing. But hopefully folks will agree that, that's not too bad. I'll do one more zoom. I mean, now we're almost a pixel peeping level here. And I will flash them. So that's the old one. And if you look at the details, like especially near the center of the galaxy, and compare them, clearly, again, we're nonlinear, so it's not completely apples to apples. But in terms of the details of how much resolution you can get out of the clouds and what have you, the dust lanes, I think that is a fair comparison. So pretty decent. And I consider myself reasonably skilled with deconvolution, but this new software makes it so that you pretty much don't have to do deconvolution anymore. I'm still exploring whether or not deconvolution in the nonlinear phase on top of the linear deconvolution that BlurXterminator is doing, whether or not, that is helpful or hurtful. And, the jury's out. I mean, but I think in general, my feeling is that this is pretty nice software, and it's going to raise the level of everyone's images probably a lot. And then we're going to have to look for what's the next discriminator, right? How do we differentiate good pictures from pictures that were just thrown together and BlurXterminator plopped on them? But as a deconvolution tool, they did a pretty good job. I can't really beat their deconvolution, even though I'm reasonably skilled with deconvolution. So. All right, so if there are questions about those images, I'm happy to take them, or I don't know much about BlurXterminator. We're learning all together because I think that software's been out now for a glorious 1 week or 2 weeks, something like that.
Have you tried it on a masked image?
Well, I am masking the nonlinear. So I definitely, you mean in the linear state, have I tried to mask a linear image and then do the BlurXterminator?
Yeah.
No, I typically don't mask my my linear images. I just take the data through. In fact, you can see on the side here, I think you can see my flow here. So generally speaking, I'm not doing too much to the nonlinear or to the linear stuff. I'm just getting to drizzle integration. And once I get done with that, then I do a background neutralize, a DBE, photometric color calibration. I do some denoising, and then that's pretty much it, right? There's the spot right here for my decon line, which I'm no longer doing. That was where I was, taking a dynamic PSF. I would take a spread spectrum of, maybe 50 to 60 stars, and then average them out with the dynamic PSF tool, and then do the deconvolution off of that. But I'm not doing, you don't need to do that anymore. this tool is good enough to just, if you use the standard settings, the default settings, pretty good as is. And if you tweak, you don't really need to tweak too much. If you go too hard, of course, you'll get worming. You still get worming. It's a decon tool, so you're going to get worms if you take it too far. I guess I'll ask in reverse. Have you done any linear masked images where where you run the decon app after the masking?
I have not. I've so far I've only experimented with this on one image, which is an older image of the eagle, and I just did a straight vanilla take the defaults application to that, and it worked out really well.
So I think if you read the instructions for it, in general, they want you to do this processing as soon as possible in the linear state. So essentially, a background neutralize and maybe a DBE is about as far as you want to go, or photometric, maybe even a photometric color calibration, but that's it. You should do it there and then move on after that, because all your PSFs are going to get cleaned up. And so I think if you masked, I actually think it would be counterproductive to mask the image and do the BlurXterminator on a mask. That's just my gut feeling based upon what I've seen so far of playing with it. Okay, I'll give up the screen so others can have it.
Doug, before you go, on his website, he talks about the de-blurring, particularly, for stars that are not perfectly round. How have you found that? Does it work as well as he claims, or
yeah, I actually
really play with it?
Well, okay, so something that's not necessarily obvious in my pictures, I didn't pick the best pictures to bring this out, but in Araza, especially at low elevation, the spherical design causes a color match problem. And if you look in my workflow, there is a channel match icon right there that I always apply, especially for low level, low altitude targets. And what happens is, if you remember from my talk some time ago, the red, blue, and green have a spread, okay, that they start to spread out from each other. The spots spread out in microns. And so matching those up for low elevation targets is kind of difficult. And one thing I've noticed here is, wow, for whatever reason, he is not only able, he claims he can take an elongated and egg-shaped PSF and kind of return it to semicircular. It's not going to work in miracles, but if you've got a really egg shape, you're not going to fix that entirely. But not only can he do that, but he's pretty good at channel matching. This is something I definitely picked up on, and he's doing it better than I am. And if you ever played with a channel match in PixInsight, it's kind of a beast. You have to kind of, you've got individual numeric values that you have to set for red, green, and blue, up, down, left, and right, each of them. And trying to get a perfect match on that, and because it's elevation dependent, it's a pain in the butt to do that and get it to come out right. And this has completely eliminated that. So I think from that perspective, he's found something in the PSF calculations that gets him to match up the channels nicely and stack them back on top of each other in a way that saves that trouble. So I think as a workflow reducer, PixInsight is already complicated enough to work with, but this is going to make a lot of people happy, because both deconvolution, which was kind of a complicated topic in the first place, and some of the other things like channel matching and what have you, they're much better now. They're easier. It's a one-step process, and so I'm pretty comfortable with the software. I think it's going to be a show. It's going to change the game a little bit for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think
Okay,
in WBPP, there's also a way to, you can have the output generated as the individual RG and B monochrome channels rather than just the RGB combined. And then once you channel combine those, that pretty much gets rid of the atmospheric refraction effect, dispersion effect.
Yeah.
So it probably takes longer. So that's probably the downside. So assuming they both work equivalent.
So I can, I have been doing it. I've been bludgeoning the channels to get them back together. But I think it's a lot nicer to have it done as a byproduct of, of BlurXterminator. So from that perspective, pretty happy. I sent out a note to the forum just as a reminder that one hell of a talk Russ gave at the Astro Imaging conference this year. And if you want to know what's under the covers of this, how does it work? Is it magic? Is he replacing pixels in your picture with pixels from Hubble? A lot of people think that's what's happening. That's not the case. And if you want to kind of try and understand what's happening, I highly recommend that talk, that video. He actually has a movie where he shows the neural network learning. And you see the progression of it going through, trying to figure out, how do I get rid of these stars? It's for Star Exterminator, but it's a great movie. And the rest of the text and the documentation and the presentation that he gives is well worth the 1 hour to go view. You can view that for free. All you have to do is register on the channel, and then you have access to the imaging library. And all those talks are available. So I think well worth it for folks who haven't done that. And I get no money back from Russ.
He also asked at the end of his talk, if you have images that you think are difficult to deal with, that you can send them to him and he'll throw them into his workflow so that he uses them for the training of the neural network. So he's always looking for.
I thought about sending him. I thought about that, because if you guys have seen my PSF, some of them are a little bit weird because I've got this one cable that's spiral wrapped going down at an odd angle. And I think the answer to that is, not to send Russ that picture, but to fix my circular, fix my PSF so that I don't have that cable crossing the field of view in the way that it's there. And who knows how much stuff he'll get. So the thing I would say about this software, by the way, is that it's pretty slow. If you don't have a GPU on your computer, to get the GPU configured, I think is well worth it. And right now, Windows, the TensorFlow folks have a broken link, and so you can't get the GPU for Windows software that you need to get that set up right. But they know about it. They're trying to fix it, so hopefully they'll get that sorted out. But it does take a little longer to run than, for instance, StarNet or what have you. So expect that if you haven't played with it yet.
Hey, Doug, this is Dave. I recently just joined the club, and I bought my scope about 3 weeks ago, and I'm trying to understand what you guys are talking about. I'm sure I'll get to it in the next 5 years. I'll know what you're talking about. But is this BlurXterminator? I've heard of Star Exterminator. Is BlurXterminator available on the Mac?
Yes, it is.
Okay, good.
Yeah, if you just go to his site, you can just Google and you'll find his site.
Right.
And I think it's all there. Now, again, I don't know to what extent performance might vary between both telescope systems and operating systems, but yeah, definitely worth a look. And he gives you a 30-day trial. So I would recommend that people just go out and grab the trial, run through a couple of your images, see how you like it, and then you can decide whether you want to pay the $100, right? And if you have another one of his products, I guess he gives you a little bit of a discount or something. So
that's nice.
Yeah, but the 30-day trial is definitely worth it, just for nothing else, to see if it works for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. This is Alan. Just FYI for you, I'm a Mac user, and it's actually pretty fast on the Mac. It only takes about 30 seconds on a 50 megabyte image.
Great.
So I know it's quite a bit slower on Windows, and you have to download the tensor libraries Doug was talking about. And Warren Keller actually posted a link to those today somewhere. I can find it and send it out to the group if anybody's interested. But for Mac users, it's pretty darn fast. I've had no trouble.
So wow, that is amazing. You said 30 seconds on a 50 meg file?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, that's far better than what you're getting on a PC.
Yeah,
I'm thinking that my 40 meg
like
file.
5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Easily 5 minutes. Maybe longer. So that's pretty impressive. All right, now on the Mac, you have a GPU built in? Is that how that's working?
Yeah, but it's not an NVIDIA, it's not a card like it requires on Windows. It's just, I'm just using a laptop, and it's about 3 years old. And I have 32 gigs of RAM in it. It's a relatively fast machine. It was back in the day, but WBPP can still take 3 or 4 hours, but Noise Exterminator or BlurXterminator, I should say, only takes about 30 seconds.
But you've got a GPU in that Mac, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, they all.
So I
pretty
think
much have.
that's the difference, because I have the same, I have a laptop, it's got a GPU, but I need that library to be enabled, right? And so I'm very much looking forward to having that done, because yeah, pretty slow without, if you're just using the CPU, pretty slow.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate that 2 weeks after I bought all my rig from Arizona, including the camera and everything else, being a complete newbie, 2 weeks later, my 2012 iMac died on me. So I'm on an iMac 24 that has like 8 cores in it, and it's very fast compared to what I had before.
Well, it should be interesting to see whether or not, you can match that performance. I'd say that's pretty nice. Alan, I'm jealous.
Finally,
I want to hurry up and
something.
get that done, because I'm tired. I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to wade through 130 pictures of reprocessing at the, on a CPU, right? I need that GPU running. So,
Well, if it makes you feel better, Warren Keller said that he was at about 5 minutes, and once he optimized his GPU, he got it down to about 20 seconds.
oh wow, okay, looking forward to that. That's
Yeah, and he
thanks for
said the
that heads up.
documentation in for BlurXterminator goes through exactly, what tweaks you need to make to get your machine faster with that
Yeah,
stuff.
no, definitely. If you pull up the icon for BlurXterminator in PixInsight, there's a little documentation widget on the bottom right-hand side. I think it's like the third one. And if you click on that, the documentation comes up, and that's the documentation I've been following to install all that stuff. And I had it running because the GPU was running on Topaz originally, but for whatever reason, I don't know, I'm not sure, it's not exactly the same. And now CUDA is updated to version 12 or something. And so what a pain. This is very painful on a PC to get all those libraries set up correctly.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But anyways, you're right. He does go through in the documentation to describe that. So you just recipe, right?
Yeah, the documentation is quite good. And I'll say typically the documentation in PixInsight is pretty awful, but this one's really good, because I think Russ did a good job with it.
But I actually think, again, if you read that documentation first, get lost a little bit, and then go look at his astro imaging conference talk, very helpful. That talk is about Star Exterminator, but same game, yeah, and really helpful to see that stuff, because I was totally confused until I watched that, his presentation, and I was like, oh, okay, not quite as magic as I thought.
I would just personally would like to know, how come he's got it so figured out and nobody else does?
I think other people do. I mean, if you look at his talk, he's, essentially, if you subtract the training, if you think about what's the other one? I just lost my mind. Topaz. If you think about the difference between Topaz and BlurXterminator or Star Exterminator or Noise Exterminator, they're doing the same exact neural network. Maybe he quoted the numbers for how many levels of processing were being, how many independent variables were being modeled through the network, and they're in the millions. Each of those products are in the millions, and they don't vary by very much. But in general, it's the same game. I think the big discriminator between Topaz and BlurXterminator is that Topaz has taken pictures of dogs and cats and people. And of course, trees and everything else, right? They're a very broad-based product, and they do, a reasonable job. But this product was done just on, on space-based images, and so he's got a slightly different angle. He knows what truth for PSF values in space are. He's able to take a look at yours and the noise floor, and then apply a deconvolution model that is more fitting for astrophotographers. And I think the specialization is the discriminator.
Yeah, you're probably right. And the deconvolution, I mean, you're an expert, but it gives most people fits. And this is kind of like a quick and dirty decon. It just works,
But okay, so I'll acknowledge that I know what the heck I'm doing with decon. I've been playing with it a long time, and I feel like I'm fairly expert in using PI's decon tools and how to kind of finagle that to get the best I can out of it. And I can't match his tool, right?
Wow.
I just cannot produce at the level that that tool is producing, especially for the small stars. And so, you know, he's done a hell of a job here. I think he did a good job.
Yeah, it's really nice. And one thing, as far as your workflow goes, I have been told, or I've seen taught today that he recommends you do it before you do denoising, because it was actually trained on noisy images. So
Yeah, well, for sure, if you think about denoising, you're definitely changing the profiles, right? You're changing the PSFs.
yeah,
So yeah, definitely do not denoise. That's why I was saying only do, you know, the minimum stuff, right? Color calibration's okay, and the DBE is okay.
yeah, I put it right after, you know, like you said, I do DBE, I do SPCC or PCC or whatever you're using for you know, color calibration, and then this. And
That's
I'm
right. That's
keeping model
exactly
these
the way I'm
days,
doing it.
and I did it on the luminance and on the RGB images both. Because hey, it only takes 30 seconds, right?
Yeah, well, sure, absolutely. So yeah, but I definitely agree. The earlier in the flow, the better, and the results speak for themselves. Yeah, just play the pre and post game, snap them back and forth on top of each other, and you know, it's pretty obvious that he's done a pretty good job with the star PSS.
Yeah,
and I think the details, you know, in the clouds and what have you are good as well. So what remains to be seen over the course of time, people are going to beat this to death, and they'll find out if there's a problem in there. But I think in general, his foundation seems a little better than the foundation that Topaz had.
Yeah, that seems pretty solid.
We'll see. But I think in general, we're talking about, from a technology perspective, same network kind of processing, maybe a few more variables, right? Maybe a few more million variables that nobody understands, and not even he understands, right? You don't mess with it. You let it learn. And that there's a great, like I said, there's a great movie in that talk where you watch the thing learn. That is worth the price of admission right there. Go find that movie.
Check it out. I've seen parts of the talk, but not the whole thing.
Watch that neural network learn how to take stars out of an image, and you know, pretty fascinating to watch that thing go. So,
well,
yeah. Sorry, Greg. Didn't mean to hog the time there.
That's fine. Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, we're just about at the end of an hour here. So next month's meeting falls on the third Monday, January 16th, which is MLK Day. Does anyone have any opposition to going ahead and just having the meeting that day, even though it's a national holiday? Okay, no, hearing none. Also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying I'm good with it.
Okay. We've been having our meetings via Zoom, although the TAAA has gone back to having a hybrid meeting where they have in person as well as Zoom. And I've kind of avoided doing that simply because the place where we met previously was Total Wine and More, and it was always an issue getting in their classroom. And it seems that more people are able to participate via Zoom. So unless some folks definitely want to meet in person, I think most of the comments I've heard is that folks want to continue to do the monthly meeting by Zoom. Any comments or questions about that?
My only comment is, for the past 3 years, my wife and I have been very safe from COVID. We've taken all the precautions. And then early November, we live in Del Webb and Vail. And we went to the Health and Wellness Expo. And then a day or so later, we both had COVID. So figure that one out. You can't even be safe at a Health and Wellness Expo full of doctors.
Yeah. Anytime there's a group, you're in trouble.
Right.
Okay.
Zoom is just perfect for this.
Yeah, I think so.
Images, and there'd be no way to duplicate what we're doing on Zoom.
Yeah, I think so too, Randy. So we'll continue to do this via Zoom unless, you know, some better option comes along. Last but not least, I've got a few potential speakers lined up for the next month or so. But if you have topics that you would like to discuss, particularly if you want to volunteer to lead a discussion, please send those to me. so we can decide how to do that and when to get someone to speak on that topic, or to have you volunteer to speak on that topic. So again, if you have things that you think the group would benefit from, please let me know. And keep in mind that we try to have an equal distribution between advanced topics and basic topics, although there probably aren't any real basic topics when we talk about astroimaging. But again, if you have a basic topic or an advanced topic that you'd like to discuss or hear more about, please let me know. You can email me at the email address that comes with all these announcements. Any other comments or questions?
Just as a newbie, in terms of meeting in the dark sky areas, is that generally done once a month, or you just sign up for it? What's the process for that?
The TAAA has, if you're talking about the dark sky site at CAC,
Yes.
they have an online scheduling tool, and it usually revolves around the new moon cycle. So
Right.
if you're interested in going to that site, you have to sign up online to procure a place. We also have a semi-dark site at Timpa, but that doesn't provide any amenities like CAC does. And that site is typically open only when the weather permits and someone's there to open the gate. So again, you have to watch the online, or have to ask online about whether or not that's going to be open again. I think that's typically done on weekends for the most part during the new moon cycles.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank everybody for your participation, and we'll see you next month.
All right,
Hey, everybody.